Nope.
that
Nope.
had.
Nope. Nope. There were regional frameworks for about 3 months until you couldn't stand it anymore and took over and the state took over all of the COVID protocols. There was, remember, it was for a while, it was county wide. It was every county was sort of in charge of their own COVID response. And then it got to a point where Newsom stepped in and said, this is actually a great freeze frame for him right now. He kind of looks like Robert De Niro. Then he stepped in and became Emperor Newsom, and he decided he was going to set all the rules and he was going to decide exactly how it was. And yeah, there were fits and starts, mostly because you kept changing the parameters of how we went from, like, how did we know? What was it? Like, counties were in red tier, orange tier, green tier. It was like all these different, like, green tier was almost impossible to get to because it was like one COVID case per 100,000 or something like that. Like, it was fits and starts because you kept changing the rules. But I think Chuck Todd is onto something here where he says, yeah, you shut down churches, which you went to the Supreme Court and lost. It's actually a church here in San Diego, South Bay Pentecostal Church, which took you all the way up to the Supreme Court, and you lost, and you had to be forced by the Supreme Court to reopen churches. But then you see the movie industry had no problem reopening, and they could be open and have how many people working. Yeah, there was priorities of what got opened and what didn't. And the fact that worship, which is protected in the Constitution, was shut down, but the movie industry, not protected in the Constitution, was allowed to go on, it does look pretty bad. What do you think?
Do you recall the video of the woman who had a restaurant in LA and she set up, like they were told, the tent outdoor structure kind of thing so that people could eat outdoors? And then some Hollywood movie needed her space and she was shut down and they took over her space so that staff could eat out there.
Yep.
If I could just count one point about Newsom to anybody and everybody for the rest of his life and beyond and in history, because he's going to be written in history books and it's going to be a complete lie. Like, he's going to somehow be the hero of COVID in these history books. Newsom never cared about you, about your family, or about your livelihood. He literally just decided he only cared about his power and he shut you down. He doesn't care about small businesses. He destroyed small businesses. He destroyed the livelihood of people. People are still trying to recover from these massive losses. And of course, we know suicide rates went up and mental health issues went up and education failed. He did that, and he does for years. I mean, what was it? We just allegedly lifted the orders last year. 3 years. 3 years. There's no hindsight. He had 2 weeks to slow the spread. He had hindsight. 2 weeks. 3 months, he had hindsight. He kept it going, kept it going, kept it going. And I just, especially if you're a Democrat and the fact that you voted for this guy again, I'm sorry. You're an idiot. I hate saying that because we can have difference in politics and you're not an idiot, but voting for this guy, you were an idiot. He destroyed people you knew. Maybe you weren't destroyed. Maybe you weren't hurt because maybe you worked in Hollywood or you were a nurse and, things carried on so great. But this actually just makes me angry to no end. I'm getting hot talking about this because he's sitting here trying to say, no, this was we and collectively hindsight. And, we did what we knew we could. No. People were screaming at you, Newsom. People were telling you, we need to reopen. We need to do this. And sure, there was other people saying, okay, good, shut down. There were sheriffs. I know Riverside and Orange County were like, we're not following these lockdown orders. Go do as you please. Open your businesses. Freaking Nancy Pelosi, his little BFF, was getting her hair done in the salon when we were all told that we weren't allowed to do that. And, on and on and on and on and on. This man does not care about you. Do not vote for this man for president. Do not vote for him for anything. And if you do, go seek help because there is nothing here. This is nothing. And California is worse off than it was. He needs to go. And yes, I'm angry.
No, rightfully so. I think people need to remember that anger. And I think that video of that lady, like you mentioned, you can go look it up. I think that perfectly sums up the frustration that a lot of small business owners were feeling during COVID, which was what's going on here? The rules make no sense. They're not consistent. You can't justify it. And his whole, well, it's we, and it's we didn't know what the science was and we were figuring it out. And it's like, well, why in the moment, even in the moment, why was the science different for the movie industry who had actors and tech and staff and all of that stuff, a crew of 70, 75 people? Why is that science different to allow them to do what they were doing, but a small business was not allowed to do anything? And that's why I
Mhm.
think people were really frustrated was you're applying the rules of science, which is supposed to be objective and it's not supposed to change. COVID didn't care if you were a movie crew or a small restaurant, but you were applying the rules differently. And I think people that's the frustration. That video sums it up, that people saw right through it, that he was just kind of picking and choosing. And you knew the state of California was picking and choosing the industries that they liked as opposed to equally across the board. And the fact that
Right.
churches were shut down, but liquor stores were remained to be open. Like those were two
Hmm.
things that I think people looked at that and went, okay, so we can drink ourselves silly and stay in the house, but if we want to go worship, we can't do that. So,
Therapy therapists were shut down too. I mean,
right.
they were allowed to do online, but I know, I mean, I've talked about it here before with my daughter who was going through some weird extreme anxiety disorder, not because of COVID. I'm not blaming COVID for that, but she had to do her, she wasn't speaking and she was supposed to do these online Zoom meetings with her therapist. And literally, she was 8 at the time. She was doing it like this and she, not speaking, put her head down and cried for an hour.
Mhm.
And like, I had to watch my daughter go through that. I
Yep.
mean, okay, I guess I could have pulled her off, but we were in this desperate, like, she needs therapy because she's not speaking. She 8 years old and went mute. And I'm sorry for everyone that I called an idiot. You're probably not an idiot, but you need to do a little bit of soul searching.
Yeah. And hopefully
I
people
got
who,
socks on. I'm like taking off my socks right now.
I think I hope a lot of people look back who maybe supported all this back during COVID, kind of look back on this and go, I was kind of wrong on all of that. And hopefully more influencers who are on the left start speaking up about this stuff. Um, I had a point I was going to make, but I completely forgot about. Oh,
I'm sorry.
and obviously science doesn't apply. Like when during the whole summer, obviously this point has been made ad nauseum at this point that protests in name of George Floyd and BLM, where obviously science didn't apply.
Mhm.
You could amass thousands of people together in Oakland, LA, Beverly Hills, San Francisco. Here in San Diego, there were protests. Those were fine. You didn't have to break those up. But if 50 people want to get together in church, not all right. So,
Right. And they actually would come out with articles saying studies show no COVID was passed amongst this protest of 6,000 people or whatever.
yeah, I don't know how
It
they
was
even traced that, but it was complete and utter BS.
it was
Um,
it was.
but props to, I think it was Awaken Church down here. They just ignored all of it and were like, we're just gonna have complete full services. So they were one that kind of put their thumb in the face or in the eye of Newsom at that time.